Hi everyone, I am Nick and today we are going to talk about multi-pilot aircraft. In other words, is there one or two pilots flying the aircraft? Actually there is two. But this topic came up to me while one of my friends asked me when are you going to really fly this aircraft alone? And I said, I can still fly it alone, but it is mandatory to be two of us. So the question is, how is the co-pilot considered as? Is it considered as a pilot or just an assistant? And in that case, who has control of the aircraft? Let's talk about the etymology of the word. Pilot and co-pilot. Most of the time when you use the prefix co at the beginning of a word, means sharing with. You have co-operator, which means operating with, and the co-pilot is operating the pilot of the flying of the aircraft with the other pilots. So actually both of them are co-pilot for each other, but they have a different role actually. Let's say more captain and first officer. These words show more easily the hierarchy between those two pilots. The captain, which is in a civil aircraft sitting on the left side, has the responsibility. He is the one who decides, and he is the one who will be punished or rewarded in case of any events. But both of them are pilots. During one flight, we can more talk about different functions. We used to say PF as pilot flying and PNF as pilot non-flying. But as this used to mean that one is doing the job and the other one is doing nothing, these names have been changed and this one has disappeared, has been replaced by PAM, like pilot monitoring, which literally means the pilot who is looking at the other. But this is not the only thing that he does. Of course, those two functions, as pilot flying and pilot monitoring, are not dedicated to the captain and first officer. Both of them will switch their role for every single flight according to their own request actually. So who does what? The pilot flying is actually in charge of the path of the aircraft. He is really flying the aircraft. The pilot monitoring is not doing nothing. He is taking care of communication both with air traffic controllers but also with the cabin behind. He is in charge of the navigation and following of the fuel consumption. He is in charge of managing all the system of the aircraft, and he will do the checklist and the logbooks. But all the things are being ordered by the pilot flying, who is asking the pilot monitoring to do this stuff, except some special situation in which the monitoring has to do things because it's related to the phase of flight. But there is a special case with the autopilot. When the pilot flying is using autopilot, he doesn't need to handle the controls. He basically controls the autopilot via different knobs. In other words, you can see in the corners, up right, up left, bottom middle, three magenta numbers which represent speeds, altitude and heading. Those are the three-dimension paths that the pilot flying will order the autopilot to follow. So while he is on autopilot, he will manage his knob alone and the pilot monitoring will do his job. But once he goes to manual flight, it means his hands are not supposed to leave the control. In that case, he will ask the pilot monitoring to change the knob for those magenta numbers to be updated for him. But actually, he would not need it to fly the aircraft. Those should be just used as markers so that he will not forget and everybody is aware that this is what we are supposed to follow as a path. So as I said, the pilot flying gives orders to the pilot monitoring. But what about hierarchy in this system then? Well, if it's the first officer, co-pilot, who is pilot flying, he will have to give orders to the captain. Of course, the captain has a responsibility, so he will still be able to refuse or give information to say that he doesn't agree perfectly with the orders of his first officer. But in any case, they will try to agree together to the course of action to do. But in the other way around, if it's the captain, which is pilot flying, the first officer, is not also supposed to obey without thinking. If the captain asks something which is completely nonsense, dangerous or illegal, the first officer is supposed to react and say, well, there is a danger here. We talk about assertivity, which means that each pilot is supposed, when he is monitoring or flying, to let the other one know exactly what's going wrong. But the thing is that if you want to protect a good relationship between two pilots, especially if you are the subordinate talking to the captain, you're supposed to keep a relation to let the other one know there's something wrong without accusing him. For instance, if one system has been forgotten to turn on, we will say the system is still off, but we will not say you have forgotten to turn it on or off. So what's happening in that case for the task management if there is an emergency? Let's say we have lost an engine, or it is in fire, or something really like giving you a lot of job to do. In that case, the pilot monitoring will have a lot of workload increasing, because he will have to manage communication, he will have to survey everything, he will have to do some checklists and try to recover some systems. In that case, it happens that the pilot flying will take over the radio, which means that he will be flying and talking to the radio. It's not a very big deal, but it will leave some areas for the pilot monitoring to work. But what about if one of the two pilots loses his capacity to fly? Let's say the pilot flying loses it and he's not able to fly anymore. Let's say he had a heart attack or a problem with the food, whatever. In that case, the other pilot will become pilot flying and he will take over all the action for him. So he'll be in charge of the path, navigation comms, system, checklists and logs. Well, logs will be secondary in that situation. But in this situation particularly, you will see all the importance of having an autopilot and having all those markers updated at any times. Let's see an example in the next time. We will see a video to see how this workload is shared between the two pilots. This video was shared by another pilot on a social network, and I will share you the link below in the description of this video. On the left side, you will see the captain, who is pilot flying, and you can already see that he has hands-on controls. On the right side, the first officer is pilot monitoring, and his hands are on his knees. Let's go a little bit forward. Look particularly on the first officer side. As you can see, the first officer is moving his hands all around, looking everywhere, updating on the system, working a lot, changing the charts, everything. In the same time, now the video will start again, and you can watch more particularly to the captain on the left side. His left hand and right hand are stuck to the controls. Sometimes he will leave his right hands to just update some information in front of him, just to update the information on his navigation display in front. But he will never leave the control, he will just give orders to his first officer on the right side. So finally, what's the point of having two pilots in an aircraft? Well, safety first. Having two pilots gives the opportunity to each other to cross-check the other decision and actions. This way, you're reducing considerably the risk of mistakes and, as a result, of accident in the end. The other reason would be like, you cannot start in this kind of job with a lot of responsibility, having a lot of passengers on board, without having a little bit of experience. So the best way to start your experience is to be a first officer, and you are actually a student captain, gaining experience from the other pilot who probably has more experience than you, and little by little you taking the responsibility until you go to the left seat. I hope you enjoyed this video and it was interesting for you. If you liked it, you can still subscribe and you will be informed for the next videos. Until then, please stay tuned and see you soon.